Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to objectively unpack an incredibly complex yet totally fascinating concept, and that is citizenship. You know, it's a word we hear literally all the time, but what does it actually mean in practice? Today, we are going to break down the key points and ideas that define our modern world. We'll be tracing the journey of citizenship all the way from our local everyday rights to the massive global crisis of statelessness. Here's our roadmap for today. We will kick things off by defining a citizen, jump into the insider-outsider debate, and then look at rights and marginalized groups. After that, we'll examine globalization versus protectionism, dive into the statelessness crisis, and wrap it all up with universal versus global citizenship. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, defining a citizen. Okay, let's dive into this foundational idea. Citizenship isn't just a document or a passport. It's the fundamental guarantee of full and equal membership within a political community. This is a concept that actually emerged historically from massive shifts, like the French Revolution back in 1789, and later the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. The whole goal was to replace the idea of people being mere subjects with being equal members who share a collective political identity. And in exchange for this membership, you get unalienable rights, meaning rights that absolutely cannot be taken away from you, along with the protection of the state.
What's really interesting here is how these overarching, almost philosophical concepts translate into everyday life. Take India's Article 19, for example. It outlines fundamental rights like freedom of speech. But look at those middle points, the freedom of movement and the right to reside anywhere. These are absolutely critical. For the vast majority of the working population out there, simply being able to move freely across your own country to find a job and settle down is the single most vital right for daily survival. But as we'll see, having that legal right on paper often bumps into some pretty harsh realities.
Moving on to Section 2, the insider-outsider debate. To really understand the domestic friction that sparks up when this freedom of movement is actually put into practice, the source material uses this brilliant visual analogy. It's the jam-packed train compartment. I really want you to visualize this with me. Imagine a train just sitting at a station. Inside the train, it is completely packed. The people inside immediately form a unit, right? They become the insiders. Because space is so incredibly limited, they naturally oppose anyone else trying to get in. They might literally try locking the doors. Meanwhile, the people out on the platform, the outsiders, they're pushing to enter because they just need to get to their destination. This exact dynamic plays out in rapidly growing cities, whether we're talking about Mumbai or Bangalore. When domestic migration happens faster than city governments can actually plan for, scarce resources like jobs, medical care, and education become highly contested. It creates this fascinating paradox of migration. Locals, out of fear for their limited resources, resist demographic shifts, while the migrants are simply exercising their constitutional right to seek better opportunities. Which brings us to Section 3, rights and marginalized groups. So the crucial point is that having equal rights on paper definitely does not guarantee an equal experience in reality. Marginalized groups like the urban poor, slum dwellers, and tribal communities face immense hurdles. To really illustrate this, let's look at a landmark 1985 Supreme Court ruling, Olga Talis versus the Bombay Municipal Corporation. In this specific case, the court ruled under Article 21, which is the right to life, that you cannot simply evict slum or pavement dwellers without a plan. The ruling basically stated that it is the direct responsibility of the state to provide an alternate place to live before removing people. Why? Because the right to life isn't just about mere animalistic existence. It fundamentally requires basic human dignity. Now, this creates a really stark contrast in how modern cities handle their most vulnerable populations. On one side, you have inclusive policies. Think about the current redevelopment of the Dharavi slum, which involves the government teaming up with corporate partners to provide alternate housing. But on the flip side, many modern global cities use exclusionary tactics. A truly shocking example highlighted by the source is hostile architecture. Just picture a normal public park bench. During the day, it looks totally fine. But at night, on an automatic timer, metal rods physically rise out of the bench to prevent anyone from sleeping or even sitting there. It's a highly aggressive, physical way to push the poor to the fringes of the city. It's essentially locking them out of the train compartment we just talked about. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Globalization versus protectionism. Zooming out globally, the meaning of citizenship is currently caught in a massive tug-of-war. On one hand, globalization pushes for interconnectedness, free movement, and open borders. But in recent years, there has been a huge surge in protectionism. We are seeing entire political platforms built on restricting entry. The source neutrally highlights Donald Trump's Make America Great Again campaign as a prime example of this protectionist culture. Another really fascinating example is the recent UK-India trade deal. The UK specifically restricted visas for IT service professionals to protect their local jobs. But paradoxically, they made it super easy to get a visa if you have a highly niche skill, like a yoga instructor or a classical music teacher. It just goes to show how incredibly selectively borders are being managed today.
And the scale of this issue is absolutely staggering. To put that into perspective, the source notes a humble estimate that there are currently around 20 million or 2 crore undocumented immigrants staying illegally in India alone. When you see a number with that much gravity, it really highlights the immense logistical reality of border control debates. It's not just political rhetoric on a stage. It poses incredibly complex, practical challenges for any nation trying to balance state security with humanitarian concerns, raising some really tough questions about cutoff dates and deportation logistics.
Section 5. The Statelessness Crisis. So what exactly happens when individuals fall entirely outside this complex system of national borders and legal protections? Well, they face the tragic reality of statelessness. A stateless person is someone who escapes a crisis, like war, terrorism, or famine, in places like Sudan, Palestine, or Myanmar, and they flee to another country, but are denied entry. And at the very same time, they cannot return to their country of origin. This brilliantly and sadly illustrates a permanent legal limbo. They are completely stripped of the state protection and fundamental human rights we established earlier. Different nations handle this crisis in very different ways. If we objectively look at India's approach, it is highly protective of its sovereignty. India has notably not ratified the UN Conventions on Refugees. By not signing these treaties, India actually avoids being legally bound by international mandates to open its doors. It retains absolute government discretion over who gets refugee status. However, they do actively exercise this discretion when they choose to. For example, historically offering targeted political asylum to the Dalai Lama and his followers back in 1959 is treated entirely as a matter of state security and sovereignty.
And finally, Section 6, Universal versus Global Citizenship.
Now, as a theoretical solution to all this, universal citizenship advocates for treating all humans with basic dignity, humane treatment, and legal rights, regardless of their origin. It argues that in our modern era, complete isolation is simply impossible. Our global interconnectedness is just an undeniable fact. The source highlights how major events like the devastating 2004 South Asian tsunami, global health crises, or even sudden international trade tariffs in one nation instantly ripple across the globe. You can try to close your borders, sure, but a tariff or health crisis on one side of the world will inevitably impact your community, your job, and your daily life on the other side.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. As we balance the deeply ingrained significance of national citizenship with the undeniable reality of a fully interconnected world, we are left with a profound challenge. Between those locked train compartments and our open global networks, in a fully interconnected world, who truly belongs? It's a heavy question, but it's one that shapes our policies, our cities, and ultimately, our future. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the dynamics of citizenship today. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.